typical technique for building your front ends that talk to smart contracts that you need to know about as a blockchain developer. Okay, so what we're going to cover in this video is actually an update to a lot of the other tutorials we've done in the past on front end techniques that are relevant for modern blockchain development, modern web development, that has to do with functional React components. Okay, so if you're brand new and you want an introduction to what that is in the first place, what is React? So React is a client-side library that we use for building user interfaces in JavaScript. Okay, this is the standard JavaScript library that we use on pretty much every single tutorial that we've done inside this program, inside the Blockchain Bootcamp, inside the tutorials on YouTube, and there's a few different ways that you can build applications inside of React. Okay. You can see that React is a component-based library where you can basically write your individual files that contain all the JavaScript for your application. You can mix CSS and HTML and JavaScript all in the same file. Okay, you can store them as components. You have access to the state object, all that type of stuff. And there's a few different philosophies on how to write these components. Okay. So out of the box, React, like I said, is a component-based library. And sort of the default way of actually writing React components is with this component-based architecture. Because you can see here, you have this class, hello message extends React component. And this is really what's called, I guess, class-based architecture. That's what I mean when I say component-based. It's class-based for your React components. So this is the predominant philosophy that we've used in pretty much every single tutorial we've done to date on this channel for a couple reasons. It's the default way of writing React components. If you look at any of their documentation, that's how it works. It's a lot easier for people who are brand new, in my experience, to use class-based components. They're more explicit, they're less abstract. But in this video, I'm going to actually show you how to use functional components, because I think it's also something for you critical to understand if you're going to be writing, professional blockchain applications, because functional components are very common in the workplace. In addition to class-based, some people just use class-based. But I want to teach you about how to write functional components in this video today, because it's an essential skill. So we're going to take a look at that, all right? And I'm going to give you an overview of what functional components are, how you create them, how they're similar to class-based components versus functional components, how you use React hooks, all that type of stuff. So let's go ahead and actually set up the sample application that we're going to use to illustrate this, because instead of just talking about this stuff in abstract, I'd like to actually see it in the application, and we can just build it that way, and we'll encounter the concept as we go. So we'll learn by doing. So go on and download the code. You can find this. There should be a zip file down below. You won't have access to this GitHub repository. It's going to be private, but you should have a zip file where you can get all that. So go ahead and open that in your terminal. All right. The first thing we want to do, of course, is install our dependencies. So we can do npm install. All right. I've already done this step, so I'm going to skip it for now. But whenever you finish it, you should see the success message here. You might see some warnings and quite a bit of output. That's okay. It's just sort of the state of the libraries at this phase in the game. As long as you see that successful install message, that should work properly. So what we're going to do is just create a really simple application with a very simple smart contract and a very simple front end. I don't want to make it too complicated. We're just going to take a smart contract that is a simple storage contract. And you can see here, it's just going to be this contract where we can write a simple value to the blockchain and then set this variable and then read this variable value. So you can see the simple storage contract. It's going to let us set a value, all right, and then retrieve that value. And we'll just store it inside this simple variable here. The goal is not to create some sort of complex smart contract. It's really just to focus on the front end and how you can actually create a React application that talks to the blockchain and actually implements this technique for creating these React components underneath the hood. So the next thing that we're going to do is actually start our development blockchain. So I'm going to use Ganache Ganache GUI for this. This is the just the desktop app of Ganache. that's going to let us spin up a test blockchain, a development blockchain, or we can just do quick start, click Ethereum, okay? This is going to set up a blockchain where we can deploy our smart contracts and actually use it, all right? So there's that. And the next thing we're going to do is actually migrate our smart contracts. We can do truffle migrate -- reset. All right, you can see inside of our configuration file here that we're already talking to Ganache here. All right, that's what this is. Talking to Ganache. And here we go. Our simple storage contract has been deployed to the blockchain. And so now we want to go ahead and start our development server so we can actually use the application. So I'll open a new tab here, and we'll say npm run start. And this will start the web application and should open it in a new tab for us automatically. All right. Let's see here. Wait for this to finish. Check our progress. This might take a second the first time you do it, so we'll just wait and see. And while we're doing that, let's go ahead and prep MetaMask here. All right. So you want to make sure that you have MetaMask installed. All right. And okay, so it's working. It hasn't detected MetaMask yet. Let's actually do this. So what you want to do with your MetaMask is make sure you've imported your account. So you can do import account, and you can copy your private key from MetaMask. Again, don't share this with anybody, because anybody who's seen this private key for real could steal your money. So basically, we're going to take this account. This is the first one in the list, and just copy it. Click done, and then import our account. Private key. Click import. All right. And so we want to change from the Ethereum mainnet to the Ganache network. Okay. So if you don't have Ganache already installed, you can just do custom RPC, and then enter in the URL for Ganache. In this case, it's localhost 7545. Okay. But I've already done that, so I'm going to skip it, and I'm just going to click Ganache here. And now I should see the account with the Ether balance in the list. All right, so this is just fake Ether. It's not anything real. Sure, it would be nice to get a wallet for free with 99 ETH. So now we can go back to our app and look at our simple storage application with hooks. And let's just check MetaMask. It's probably going to ask us to connect. And then you can just click connect, and then I'm just going to refresh here, and boom, there you go. All right, so we've got the app working. So let's just demonstrate how it works. So you can see this is the variable value. We're going to enter in a number here. We'll just say 99. Click set. Sign the transaction with MetaMask. Click confirm, and the number should be set. Let's just see. Let's just refresh. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so it's working. All right, so that's an overview of our app and how it works. It's just a basic field here that reads the number that we've set from the smart contract and lets us set the number here. We just click set. It writes to that contract like I was showing you inside the code. All right, you can go to source, contracts, simple storage. It reads the value here with the get function, and then sets the value with the set function. All right. So now let's actually look at the important part of this code that I really want to concentrate on, because again, it's a super simple application, but the implementation of the actual front-end application we want to focus on, because we're changing our paradigm here from using class-based React components to functional React components. Okay. So let's look at a different tutorial from before. So let's start off with some past tutorials that I've done in this program. We're going to look at this one called ETH swap. You can look at this. It's public on GitHub. But I want to show you sort of the common pattern that we've used for front ends. Okay, so if you go to source components and look at app.js, this is the main file for this particular application that uses class-based React components. So inside of here, you can see that this main component has this declaration at the top. So class app extends component. All right, so that's the first thing to look at is app extends component. So component comes from React. All right, and basically this is going to pull in a lot of stuff from the React library that you can use. One of those things, a couple of those things are like this component will mount, this constructor function that we have inside of here, all right, this state object, all this stuff, okay, and a lot more, okay. So we can actually write this differently with a functional component, and there's some benefits to this, all right. So instead of writing class app extends React component, we can look at our source for this particular project, and we can look at, let's see here, source components app.js, and we can see that this looks, different, all right? So inside of here, you can see we have function app, okay, and it does not extend anything, all right? And actually, I think I'm just going to open this in my text editor because it'll look cleaner. Let's look at it. Let's look at it so we can visually tell the difference. All right. So here's the old version, and then here's a new version. All right. So the first thing we do is like function app. So it's not a component. So why would we do this? Well, one benefit is that it actually makes this component lighter from a resource perspective, okay? So whenever we were basically, pulling in this React class app extends component, this is pulling in a major part of the React library, and we don't necessarily want to do that for every single component. So we can, just bypass that and make a much lighter weight function. It's not a class, it doesn't have all these bells and whistles. It has just a very simple function to it. And functional, implementation in functional JavaScript is a modern web development trend, and that's one of the benefits of it, okay? So the next thing that you'll want to look at is that this application uses a constructor function, all right, which is part of the React class-based architecture. So this constructor is basically the function that gets run whenever the app is set up, okay? And we're doing things like initializing the state. So the state is the part of React that lets us kind of like the front-end database, okay? So if you look at React, let me just pull up the example here. Okay, so this React.js right here, here's an example of how state works. So state might be an example of this to-do list. So you can think about like a front-end database like this. So you can see your to-do list, and you can add an item to item 1, and then item 2. All right, so how does the to-do list know which items are inside of it? Okay, well, it uses something called state. It's sort of like this front-end database. In this case, we're just using this JavaScript object right here. Okay, and this object contains the items and the text. Okay, and we initialize this state inside the constructor. Now, how do you do that with React components? Because with React functional components. Well, inside of React functional components, you'll notice there's no constructor function, and that's one big differentiation. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, you do something called React hooks, okay? So you can see this React hooks API reference. I'll put a link to this in the resources so that you can check on that. So basically, instead of having a constructor function that gets run whenever the class is created, we use something called hooks, which are these basic hooks that React has built into it, like use effect, use state, use context. All right, there's additional ones which we won't cover in this video. We're going to focus on use state and use effect. So the first one I would talk about is use state, and you can see it here at the top. So instead of having a constructor function like this, that basically, let's just see here. Instead of having this constructor function that sets the state up like this, we can just pull in the state with a function call at the top of the components. Okay, so this use state null. This is the default value. And we can do it for the account and the number and my number, okay? So this would be different from basically creating this object here where we have the account, all right, So we have this big object, and we're saying the reader function for this is just account. And then we have, we could have a function that is set account, okay? But instead, we can use this syntax to just say use state, the default value is null, and this function right here will let us fetch the account from the state, and then this function right here will let us set the account value in the state. That's what use state is, and it's just a function call inside the component, so whenever React loads this function up, it will actually set these values as functions, okay, and then pull them out of this. All right, so instead of doing it inside of a constructor where we are basically setting this up here, it's a lot faster, and just do it one line right here to say this is how you read the account from state, and then this is how you modify the account in the state. All right, and the default value can be null here. So the same thing is true. Well, we'll look at this in other cases. We can see it for the loading value, for the spinner, for the message, all right, for the smart contracts. But that's the first thing to understand, is basically that use hooks to manage the state. The constructor goes away, and we don't use that anymore. So the next thing I want to talk about is how we actually load information up from the blockchain. All right, so inside of these previous patterns, basically we have this function called load blockchain data. All right, and well, we have these two functions. One is load web3. All right, and you'll see that inside of our new example here. Let's see here. Actually, hold on a second. Let's do this. Let's look at it right here. Yeah, so we're going to do it all inside the load blockchain data. So anyways, you'll see that we do a couple steps inside of here. We do load web3 and load blockchain data. So what this does first of all with web3 is it actually converts our front-end application and points it to the blockchain. So you have to use a special library, Web3.js, in order to point your application to the blockchain, and you must create a connection to it, and that's what Web3 does. Now, in this kind of old paradigm, we have a special function that basically says, load Web3. Basically, it connects to MetaMask with Web3 to talk to the blockchain like this, and we call that function here. All right, and then we have this second function, which is load blockchain data, which basically pulls your account from MetaMask. It updates your ETH balance. It loads the smart contract. It fetches the token, okay? And then it fetches the other smart contracts that are relevant to the application. Again, this is a different app than what we're building now, but that's the whole idea. Now we have that same thing here. This is load blockchain data. It connects to Web3, all right? And it pulls the account in. It checks the network that we're connected to. It loads the smart contract that we created in this tutorial. And it gets the current value of the variable that's set in the smart contract. Now, here's the key difference, moving from class-based to functional components. You can see this inside of React's special function called component will mount. All right, so inside of we don't have this function inside of functional React components. It's only part of class-based React components because component will mount comes from the React component library. All right. So what this is a lifecycle method. So this says basically whenever the component's going to mount, then load Web3, so connect to the blockchain, and then load the blockchain data. So functional components do this differently. What they do is do something called use effect. All right. So use effect is called whenever this function changes in some way. All right. So use effect, what it does here is it calls load blockchain data. So instead of doing it inside of component will mount, we do it inside of use effect. And so we have some extra logic here. We only want to do this once if the account has not been loaded yet. So basically, whenever we call this function, load blockchain data, we connect to Web3, we set the account. All right, so it's only going to call this one time, or it's only going to run this logic one time if the account has not been detected yet. And once we detect the account, we can, do that step, then connect to the network, then pull in simple storage, and then get the result, and then set the message like so. All right. All right, so that's an introduction to the basic concepts of the functional components on what use state is, why it's important, how we use this React hook, and then how we use useFact to replace the lifecycle functions inside of React. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is actually look at some of these other hooks and see how they're called. Because again, the first thing is just getting the accounts, getting the information from the state. All right, and then the second thing is actually writing information to the state. So you might notice this in the other tutorials. We say set state, like this set state. All right, so how do we replace this? Well, you can see it here. Inside of load blockchain data, the first clues is set message, set is loading. All right, so we have a loading value which says is our app loading, and if the app is loading, we can just check it. You can see is loading is red here. If we are loading the application, we want to show the spinner on the page. All right, but whenever we finish the load blockchain data, we want to say, hey, it's not loading anymore, and we don't want to show a message to the user. So we use this function that we define at the top, set is loading false. All right. So here's the value in state. The default value is null, and here. The default value is true. My fault. So by default, we want the app to be loading. So when we call is loading for the first time, it'll be true. And whenever the app is loaded, we want to set is loading to false, and we'll overwrite this value. So the first function is a reader, second function is a writer. All right. So same thing for the smart contract. We use the simple storage, set simple storage. So whenever we've loaded the contract with Web3, we do set simple storage and we pass it in here. All right. So we set it to the state, just like this. We've seen the account. All right. Set account whenever we load it. The number, set number is this. All right. And then seen is loading, and then the message is basically the message that asks them to look for MetaMask. All right, set message. All right. And so the last thing I want to talk about is we set the number here when we did get number handler. So this is like whenever we actually interact with the page and we get the number. So the get number handler is called here on the on click whenever we get the value. Okay. You can see that here. Is the get. All right, so we can set it again like 50. Click set. So we can see what happens when we click that button. Click confirm. Okay, so we've done set number. So basically you'll see this on set number handler. So on click, set my number to the target value, set number handler. This basically uses Web3 to talk to MetaMask, and it actually sets the number. All right, sends it from our account. And then when it's finished, we click get number, and it will update it. All right, and you can see that when we use this get button, get number handler, here's our function we created. It pulls it in from Web3 and clicks set number and set results. All right, and there you go. So that's an overview to React functional components, how to use React hooks, how to use useEffect, all that type of stuff, how to use state. Okay, so this is an introduction on this. Let me know what y'all think about this. Again, we might switch to permanently using these if it makes sense to everybody else. Again, the component-based architecture or class-based architecture is pretty standard, but I know a lot of people use this in production as a preferred method of doing things. If you like this, let me know. And